All right, you guys, we had a little technical difficulty. That was completely my bad, and I own that one. Sorry. Dave, welcome back.
Do you have a new link for this?
I don't know what I did, but I messed it up good. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Do you have the new YouTube link so I can send it out again? Let me see if I can find it on your channel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I got it.
Dude, I don't know what I did there.
Let me see. Let me send this out. You probably just clicked on something that you're not
Clicked on something wrong and it said dead, and I went, oh, come on, really?
So this is already live. Okay.
Sorry, guys. I messed that up. All right. I'm sorry, Dave. Go ahead and continue. That I cut you off in the middle of your sentence there.
Yeah, so I'm Dave, run the Hidden Freedom Investing channel. Dividend investing is somewhat new to me. I haven't been in dividend investing for that long. I pretty much, become a dividend investor for 2020, even though I've been investing for 20 years and invested in dividend stocks throughout those years. This is the first year that I decided to put more focus on dividend paying stocks and build out a portfolio. So January, I released a dividend reveal portfolio, $50,000. And then here it is October, and it's up to over $300,000 now. So the amount of time it takes to pretty much have a baby, I've built it from $50,000 to $300,000, and it's providing a pretty decent amount of cash flow at this point of about $800. I think this month I'll build it to $900 a month of passive income, and then I have a plan to build it up to $1 million. Eventually, as my real estate notes get bled out, there's about $600,000 in those. Hopefully those get bled out sooner than later, and then that will all go in the dividend portfolio. And mostly the reason I'm doing that is just because the tax favorability with dividends versus that ordinary income from the real estate notes. So that's pretty much, obviously there's more things I do on my channel too, but I guess this kind of talk about dividends. So
right.
Appreciate the intro.
It's really new for me too, because I've always been an index investor, and pretty much 90% of my portfolio, actually probably 95, is index funds and ETFs. And just recently, well, I'd say maybe within the last 2 years, started doing some individual stocks, dividend stocks. I do own one non-dividend stock, and that's Tesla. I own 10 little shares of it, so a small portion. But I drive an electric car, so I like their business model. That was kind of my whimsical thing. But everything else I have is dividend stocks, because when I retire, I like that I can get taxed at lower, the qualified dividends, or if I do sell out of my taxable account, then it's long-term capital gains. So that's going to be important to me, since I will have a pension. I'll probably be living on a little bit more than somebody who is just living off a portfolio.
Right.
And so it kind of changed my whole mentality and thinking of how I want to structure my retirement.
Same boat. I mean, you and I are in completely different boats, but we're in a similar boat.
Well, you're 10 years ahead of me in the boat, because you're in your 40s and I'm in my 50s.
Yeah, but you got a wife too, right? So you already have kids, whatever. So I'm not in that boat, but I don't have a pension either. So I don't have to worry about that. But so you're probably going to have to worry about, minimum distributions and all that. So it's something I think about, but I've never been through it. So I don't really even know, if I know everything about it either,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Dave, was there some sort of a pivotal moment in your life that made you really get serious about investing in general?
Well, that was this year. Honestly, the portfolio, I had no intentions of building it this fast, but at the same time, I didn't expect the 40% decline in the market either. So
Right.
when that happened, I decided to just go all in on it. I think that was the best time to do it. I had no plans of building it to this size by this point this year. I don't even think I probably was going to even build up to $100,000 this year. So
Right.
um, I'm getting serious about retiring early, and that's probably in the next about 18 months or so, maybe a little bit less than that.
Good
And
for you.
the quicker I can get that money out of that ordinary income into more tax favorable accounts or investments, that's going to just be better off for me. So, and obviously, I know I've been following you since the beginning.
I
And
I was going to say you were the first one who actually acknowledged me ever, and I think I was probably less than 100 subs back then,
oh, yeah,
uh,
for sure.
and
Yeah.
brand new. And I've been I mean, I found your channel and enjoyed it, and then when you called me out for that, meet and greet or whatever it was that Ryan Giffen put on, I was like, holy cow! I was excited because
Because
hey,
your content lines
somebody
up
out there
with
is
where I'm
actually
trying to
watching
go,
me.
right? So, like,
Yeah.
retire, you're looking at different states, you're trying to figure out what state you want to retire in, and I do too eventually, so that's why I follow you, because maybe you can do all the research for me.
Well, the wife and I just did a trip back in July down to the Phoenix area and actually looked at possible properties. And we're probably going to go ahead and build because I think that way I can have the house I want. And luckily, I mean, houses go about $100,000 less down there than they do in the Portland area here. So hopefully, all goes to plan. I can sell my house outright here, which will be basically paid off.
Right.
And not have to carry a mortgage down there in retirement, which is huge.
What was your biggest criteria for that area? Because I mean, I've been through. My dad used to live in Tucson, so I've been in the
Uh-huh.
Phoenix area too. And I mean, it's probably not a state I'm looking at personally, but so I'm kind of
Well,
curious to know.
the winters are long and gray here, man, and wet, and the sun just makes me feel better.
No,
And
I get
I
that.
lived a few years in Las Vegas, and I don't like Las Vegas at all, but I like the weather. And my wife and I both agree that it's time to go on to sunnier pastures. And so we have some friends that live down there. The cost of living is relatively inexpensive compared to where we are now. Um, and I don't want to give 9% of my retirement back to the state of Oregon. So, uh, Arizona does have it's about 2%. So, I mean, I'm saving 7 extra % right there, plus the
Which
cost of living
which
as
part are
well.
you talking
So,
about though? Because there's no sales tax in Oregon. So which part of the tax are you talking about?
oh no, Oregon income tax is the fourth highest in the country.
Gotcha.
It,
Gotcha.
I'm, I mean, we don't make big money, and we're at 9%. And
Yeah.
so my retirement, because it would be through the state of Oregon, would also be taxed at 9% for the state. Where if I lived in Arizona, it's about 2.2%.
Yeah, that's pretty low. I had a rental out there, and I remember paying taxes. I'm like, oh, that's pretty low. Like that's
Yeah,
pretty good. It's lower than Colorado, but
yeah.
Colorado's pretty low too. But
So we should probably take a look. We got GWETF channel out there, Retire with Options. You guys, welcome. Thanks for showing up. The Investing Sensei is here as well. You guys, we are going to try and answer questions when we get there, but we thought we'd first talk about dividend investing. And I thought maybe we'd start with some pros and cons. So pros, Dave, what are the biggest pros on dividend investing for you?
it's pretty much set and forget. Um, I mean, there's a lot of knowledge and information out there, and there's a bunch of different ways to skin this cat. Some people say you got to do a bunch of research on a bunch of stocks, and like don't get into it unless you do a bunch of research. And I say, screw that. I mean, what I'm doing is I'm investing in the best stocks in the world, pretty much, right? The biggest companies, a lot of dividend aristocrats, a lot of kings. What do I have to do a bunch of research for? If you can't trust these companies, then what are you going to invest in, right? That's my philosophy behind it.
I agree
You
with
want to,
you 100% on that. I feel like if a company's been growing their dividend for 25 and in some cases 50 years. That's a company that knows their shareholders want that dividend. And so they do what they can to protect it. And I think, like you said, they're all companies that people know, right? Everybody knows McDonald's. Everybody knows Coca-Cola, Johnson and Johnson, those kind of companies. You say the name, people automatically know what that is, right? It's not like where you say, well, I like Archer's Daniel Midland, which is a good company, but what do they do? I mean, for me, it's established companies that have been doing it for a long time. And I add in the caveat that I should be able to explain what they do to a 5-year-old, right?
Right.
You say, what
They're
is
probably
Coke
eating
do?
at McDonald's, right?
Yeah. What does McDonald's do? They make the best French fries out there, right? I don't personally eat there anymore because it puts too much weight on me, but they have great French fries. Coca-Cola, right? Probably the biggest name on earth when you talk about soft drinks,
One of
right?
them, yeah.
So simple. They've got a long track record. People know them.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's my philosophy behind it. But let me just caveat that with saying, hey, you still probably want to check in with the company at least once a year, I'd say. Because, I mean, I could give it a couple examples, right? I mean, GE is a good example. It used to be, a company that you probably wouldn't have to think about, right? Dividend paying stock, paying for years, and now look at it. So it is probably something that you want to keep an eye on at least once a year. Just check in on it. If you don't want to go with individual stocks, then go with something like VYM, DGRO is probably another good one. I'm personally kind of doing a hybrid portfolio right now. So I got VYM out there. I got a large portion of the portfolio in that, and I'll probably even build that out larger as time goes on. A lot less that I have to think about, but I get more diversification doing individual stocks, with a combination of maybe VYM, because VYM doesn't cover all the stocks. So that's just something I'm doing because I am supplementing this income with covered calls as well. And I just, figured doing covered calls in VYM. I know we're getting off a little bit on topic here, but it's all kind of connected. So,
yeah, I also hold VYM. I don't have as much of a stake as you do. And I also have a small portion of VIG. Back when the market fell in March, I sold off a lot of my VYM and bought into VIG for tax loss harvesting purposes. So I have both now, and I'm growing them back up. But I hold them both just because if one falls, I can sell the other one, capture some of those losses, and still not be out of the market. And I agree with you. I think it's a good way for people to not have to spend a lot of money and be able to have dividend paying. Once a quarter pays a decent dividend yield, and you don't have to do the individual stock homework that a lot of people, quite frankly, don't know what to do or how to do it. I mean, a lot of people don't know what PE ratios are.
Right.
Year dividend CAGRs. They don't know what that means. So it's appropriate.
I mean, just to kind of give a comparison here, VYM pays about a 3.5, 3.6% yield. The CAGR is roughly about 8%, a little bit higher. Pays, quarterly. All right. It's got over 400 stocks in it, if I remember correctly. And my portfolio of about 30 stocks, the yield's about the same, with the CAGR about the same. 5-year dividend CAGR is about the same. So, it's like, what am I getting with all these individual stocks? I mean, yes, you might get a little bit better return, but I'm also doing cover calls, which I'm generating an extra, 2 or 3 or 4% a year off of that.
Right.
So that's just where I'm going on it. It might not be, it might not be the answer for everybody, but it's like, obviously, VYM is just boring. You just buy that, you're done, right? It's boring. I get that, but
hey, boring is not necessarily a bad thing. It's simple. And one of my philosophies is the simpler you make your investing, the easier it is to stay on track.
I agree. I don't have a problem with doing a hybrid. It's just because there's some stocks that I want to be in that are not in VYM.
Sure.
Now, you could probably get into like DGRO, which has some of those stocks that are not in VYM, but you're going to get a lower yield too. Now, obviously, I'm retiring early. I'm targeting my retirement at 3.5% withdrawal rate, somewhere around there. Not the typical 4% everybody talks about. I'm just trying to over-engineer my retirement.
I think that's really smart.
So, I can get that with VYM. And I like Vanguard's a really superior product, in my opinion, too, compared to a lot of the other ones out there.
Yeah, I'm a big Vanguard. So let's get into one of the questions. Mr. Dan C is asking what we think about AT&T as a safe bet. And that's going to segue into my con section, but why don't you take that on? I know you just made a video, I think last week on AT&T.
I did.
I think
I
we
love
both
AT&T.
hold that.
What's that?
I said we both hold that. So I'm curious to
Yeah.
see your take on it.
I got quite a few shares of AT&T. I wouldn't dump in, my whole portfolio into it. Don't get me wrong. I mean,
I agree with
I have
that.
a pretty big stake in it right now. I probably won't ever sell that stake because I see the other positions growing larger. I don't have to grow AT&T more, but I don't think I'd stick in my whole portfolio in there or anything like that. Until they sell off, maybe DirecTV or something like that. There's a lot of debt there. Everybody talks about the debt. The
Yeah,
video I
the
made
debt
on it,
ratio is pretty high. That makes me a
yeah.
little nervous.
And the payout ratio is kind of interesting because there's a lot of videos I've been watching say it's 125%. Their documents, their SEC documents they put out say it's 65. Seeking Alpha has it 65. So it's all over the place.
Right.
I don't know what the true number is. I probably need to dig through their earnings release the next time. I think it's in October, and just see. They're paying the debt down. We'll just have to keep an eye on them. They're not going to cut the dividend or anything like that. It's a solid company. I love the company. But it's something probably just have to keep an eye on and make sure they're paying that debt down. Dump that DirecTV, find some sucker to buy it, right? They can
Yeah,
find
nobody
it.
wants DirecTV. Nobody wants cable anymore. It's a dying breed.
Well, there's rural people that are still going to need to use satellite. So I still think that they
Yeah,
can
that's
find a
probably
buyer
true.
for it. They're just going to have to dump it on pennies in the dollar, though.
Sure. Speaking of that, do you have any other companies this year with the virus that shall not be named because we're both monetized? Do you have many companies in your portfolio that have been either suspended their dividend or cut their dividend this year?
Well, I don't put up with BS with my stocks. If they're going to do something that pisses me off, I'll dump it right then and there.
Yeah.
Wells Fargo is one of those. I expected maybe a 50% cut in Wells Fargo's dividend. They cut it bigger than that, so I cut the stock out of my portfolio. I stayed with JPM only. And I just put that money to work immediately into other stocks.
Yeah.
They're ExxonMobil, I don't think they're going to cut it.
That was my next question because that's another one that I hold.
Yeah, I think they're going to. So technically, they have till the end of the year to raise one more time, right?
Right.
To be counted, whatever. To continue on with the streak, they can still raise it one more time this year. And that can go all the way to the end of the year, but typically they do it in October. So we'll see what happens in October here. I don't know. I'm on the fence. Obviously, nobody knows for sure what they're going to do, right? Nobody knows they're going to cut it for a fact or anything like that. So it's really just my opinion. Are they going to cut it or are they not? If oil stays where it's at right now, I think they're going to have to cut eventually. That's how
I think they're going to have to cut it for sure. Although when the last thing I watched, the interview with their CEO was very adamant that they had enough money to cover their dividend because they know that it's important to investors. They want their dividend, right? But God, I think it's somewhere around 8% now, and that just isn't sustainable long term.
Yeah, 37 years of consecutive dividend increases. Yeah, that's not something you take lightly, So
Well,
that's a huge thing.
Yeah, in 2013, they were the biggest company on earth.
Yes, that's true.
So, like you said, the GE thing, right? GE was a big company once too. Another one of my portfolios, Disney. Disney cut their dividend.
Yeah.
Now it's only semi-annual anyway, and it's not a huge dividend, but they're a Dow Jones 30 company.
I own Disney. I owned Disney earlier this year. They cut the dividend. I cut Disney. See
I
ya.
see.
I was
Yeah,
up on the stock anyway. And the way I looked at it is it would have taken like 4 years in dividends to make the capital gain up anyway. You know
yeah,
what I mean? So I just
that
took
one
the
really
loss.
tanked hard this year with the virus.
And then you got the activist investor today talk about, I don't know if you heard about it at all, talk about Disney saying they should just get rid of the dividend, suspend it indefinitely, and grow their Disney Plus.
Huh. Well, that might be time to dump that one for me as well then.
Yeah,
What
what did I
about
say? No div, no diz, no
no div,
kids, no
right?
diz.
No div, no stick around. The only other one that I had that suspended their dividend is Las Vegas Sands Corp. And
Oh,
I
I didn't know
remember
they
you said that
suspended it.
you're more of a win guy for that, right?
I've invested in Win, and there's a long story behind Win. It's probably my down 100K in that stock at one point because I was
Ooh,
pretty in heavy with it. So I hung with it, sold cover calls, got out of it, but I've definitely learned my lesson, or a couple lessons on that stock. And I was in Las Vegas Sands at the same time. The whole Macau thing, China. It
yeah, that
probably
didn't work out so
because most
well
of their
for them.
income comes from China.
Yeah,
So people don't realize that like Las Vegas is a small portion of their money, their
right.
revenue compared to Macau. So you're pretty much at the liberty of whatever China wants to do, and that's kind of scary.
Yeah. What do you have any other stocks in your portfolio that you're super concerned about going forward right now?
No, I cut out 3 positions in the last week. I'm trying to whittle the portfolio down just a little bit, trying to get down to about 30, and then maybe I'll cut maybe a few more eventually. But um, I the only thing I'm really worried about is just Chevron and ExxonMobil, and I think ExxonMobil is a little bit dire straits than Chevron is, but those two are a little worrisome. ExxonMobil is my biggest decliner in my portfolio. One of the accounts is down 50%. The other one's down about 40, I think. And I haven't added a lot to those though. The allocation for energy is right where I want it to be. I probably just add 1 or 2 shares a month, maybe here and there, but nothing real substantial because I don't want to take the hit if it gets cut. No, there's some people here like Jerry, maybe even mentioned it. The stock could go up if they cut the dividend, but honestly, I don't see that happening because 37 years out there, it gets pulled out of ETS or something like that. Then what if they suspend it or can get rid of it completely or something like that? I can just see the stock dumping pretty hard if they suspend the dividend or cut it substantially.
Absolutely, absolutely. Uh, yeah, that is one of those things that I mean, oil this year, just like banks. The other ones are financials, right? I mean, you said you have some JPM. I have Bank of America and JPM as well. And JPM, I think, is down 31% for me, and B of A is down, I don't know, 20%. And I've been slowly adding, 5 shares at a time to that, buying it on the discount because I figure the banks aren't going anywhere. I mean, they're struggling right now with what's going on, but I feel like those are going to turn around and eventually I'll have more shares for a better price. But
It should be a solid. It should be an okay. It should be a safe bet. I mean, I don't think they're definitely not going to go anywhere. I don't think that JP Morgan is going to cut their dividend either. I mean, it is what it is. Pretty much all the banks had to start over right after the 2008 anyway, as far as their dividend increases.
oh yeah,
But that's the one I own. I did have Goldman Sachs earlier this year. I got rid of that for profit as well. And just like I said, reduce a little bit of risk, staying with the best of the best if I can.
now when you set up your sectors, do you try to keep them close to like the S&P 500 as far as your percentages, or do you find that your percentages are a little different because of the dividends?
That's a good question. And if anybody's watched my videos, you'll see when I go to the sector allocation on the right-hand side of the screen, there's an S&P 500, like a VU or VTI there. And I got the sector weighting there, and I pretty much try to duplicate that as best as I can. Right now, utilities are running hot, and I'm okay with that because they kind of act like a bond, but yet they pay a little bit better yield. It's pretty defensive as well. I got the technology a little bit higher, financials, and I'd say maybe healthcare is running a little bit lower than where I want it. But that's the thing. I just try to keep it as close as I can to where the S&P 500 sector weighting is. Obviously, it's never going to be exact, but it's just kind of a starting point, I should say.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's hard to keep that on track too, because as you build up your losers, right? You buy the ones down, then you get out of sync to the rest of the sectors. One becomes a little bigger than you wanted it to be or whatever. But as you said, I mean, tech is a big part of the S&P 500, and tech companies don't pay a dividend for the most part, right? I mean, Apple,
Intel,
Microsoft, yes, but they're pretty low.
Intel, Cisco, IBM, pretty decent.
As that go. So it's pretty hard to actually follow that, exact. And obviously, depending on how they do individually or as a group, then sometimes they'll skew your numbers either way.
Yeah, this is probably the highest percentage I've had in tech. Now I added a lot to Intel. Now, of course, I have a different account with Intel as well, but Intel, Cisco, IBM, Apple, and Microsoft. Now, Apple and Microsoft are two larger positions. I'll probably cut the Intel position down a little bit once it gets back up to about 60, and then put some of that cash into VYM just to reduce that individual position a little bit. IBM is a dividend aristocrat. People probably don't know that, but it is. And there's a lot of younger investors that just hate that stock. They have no idea what the stock is about because they're not in your face every day. Like, Intel right. and Apple and Microsoft are in your face every day, right? If you got an Apple, laptop, or you got a Microsoft Windows, you got an Intel sticker on your laptop or something like that. Well, when's the last time anybody's run across an IBM product, besides using an ATM?
Right. Well, and you think back to I can remember in the age of early PCs, IBM was the PC, right? Absolutely. I mean, it was absolutely the machine to have. Obviously, that changed as computers got more mainstream, but they still make amazing products, and they're still in the game, just more on a corporate or business level versus, like you say, what people see on the streets. It's more kind of in the background as that goes.
I don't think they're going to go anywhere anytime soon. They have diversified quite a bit. They're pretty big into AI. The Red Hat acquisition should help them out. They're getting into. There's a lot of other things they're in as well, inside data centers and stuff that people just don't realize that they're even in. I think they're positioned better than they were just 5 years ago. It's something probably want to watch, but because all these companies, if they don't change with the times, they can become a Kodak, right?
Yeah. Well, you and I were young enough to remember when people actually took pictures, and Kodak was that was the film company.
And you went down to like a Long's Drugs, right? And you filled out a little envelope.
What is that? What's the picture?
Developed.
A lot of the tech I don't really consider holding in because it's such a big part of the S&P 500, and all of my 457 is in an S&P 500 fund.
Right.
So, I mean, all your FANG stocks make up a huge portion of I already have that. So when I pick my stocks, I try to pick companies that don't make up such a big portion of the S&P 500.
Gotcha.
That I think are quality companies. And there is obviously some overlap. I mean, I own S&P 500s and I own, VTSAX in all my Roths. So there's overlap there, but I feel like it's a simple way to own the whole market or own a large section of the market without doing a lot of homework. And as I said, that was all I did until just a couple of years ago. I kind of branched out, started adding individual stocks as more like almost play money, if you will. Obviously, it's not play money, but playing around to figure out how it worked and to get better at it, rather than putting such a substantial portion of my portfolio into it. And as time goes on, I am trying to work some of our money out of tax deferred, either into Roth or into taxable, because I think having the diversity there is going to help me hugely in retirement. Because I mean, once you cross that $40,000 threshold married, all your Social Security becomes taxable, your Medicare taxes go up, all these kinds of things that we don't think about as young people that are going to have a big impact on my portfolio in 15 years, right? So
that's the great thing about people if they're married, right? You can have almost $100,000 in dividend income, not pay a dime in taxes on it.
yeah,
Now, obviously, you're in a different boat because you got a pension, so that's going to probably require
but it's
some more.
still, I mean, it's still going to stay in the 15%, right? And that's way better than paying 24%.
Oh,
Or,
absolutely,
you
for
know,
sure.
whatever it becomes in the future. And the other thing is, if it's, you know, if a stock's appreciated a bunch, I sell off a little bit, then it's tax free, right? Because it's, or, you know, it's long-term capital gains, so it's going to be lower, and certainly lower than any of the stuff I'm going to be pulling out of my tax deferred.
Yeah, I try to talk to my mom every so often and ask her, like, how does this work? How does this Medicare stuff work and all that? So, because it's until you go through it, it's hard to like understand what moves you need to make. And unfortunately, it's not like I've been in retirement planning for the last 2 years, right? Moving cash around it's not an easy thing. It
No,
takes
it's not.
time, selling out of certain types of assets takes a long time, especially if you want to try to reduce the tax burden, right? Like selling homes, you don't want to sell 5 homes in the same year.
No.
You want to kind of spread those out if you can, right?
What about REITs? Do you have a lot of REITs in your portfolio?
I got realty income. That's the only REIT
Everybody
I
has
own.
realty income.
Yeah.
That's the popular one. I actually hold a Vanguard REIT index in my
VNQ.
in my in one of my Roths, and then I have 4 individual REITs. I have some realty income. I have public storage. I have CCI, which is Crown Castle International. They
Right.
do 5G towers and that kind of stuff, cell towers. And then I have, what's the other one? Oh, AGNC, which is one that I want to get out of. It's a
I was
monthly
just gonna
payer,
give you the thumbs down on that one.
but the thumbs down on that one. It's going badly because
Yeah.
it's mortgage REITs. And when I bought it, I didn't understand what I was buying, and I kind of hoped that it would come back. And I don't think it's going to come back. So
I own fund. I have quite a, $15,000-$16,000 in a fund rise. So that's more REITs there.
yeah,
And those are kind of diversified across residential and commercial as well. So it's kind of like, a REIT ETF in a way.
and you also have a lot of personal real estate holdings, notes, and whatnot as
I
well.
have notes. I have a lot of notes. And then I do have 2 flips that I was doing that turned sideways that are going through foreclosure right now. So hopefully
Oh,
I get
no.
that capital back.
Huh. Well, we're at about 33 minutes. How long do we want to go with this? If we have anybody that has some questions specific to dividends or anything that we've talked about, Stock Ninja says he likes IBM. Retire with Options says Commodore, the poor man's PC. I like that. You got to go back a ways to remember the Commodore 64.
Yeah.
Or even the little one, the VIC-20. I actually had a VIC-20 when I was in high school.
Well, Randy was born in 1920, so
yeah.
He probably remembers the mainframes. He probably had one in his house or something. But that's what made IBM pretty much famous. And IBM has a long history going back to the early 1900s, I think 1911 or something, and had a different name and everything. Started with punch cards, and
yep.
There's a long history with IBM.
So Mr. Dan C says the S&P 500 or NASDAQ if you had to choose. I'll let you answer that.
It depends on how old you are, but I would say S&P 500, all day long. But let me just preface that and say, I don't think there's a problem with sticking some extra cash into like QQQ as a booster. What I call a satellite holding or whatever, because eventually I'm probably going to generate more income than I can use from my dividend portfolio, investments, and covered calls, cash secured puts. that eventually I'll probably dump some of that cash into QQQ as just like a booster and just let it sit there.
Yeah, I'm afraid tech is skyrocketed up so much that it's got to plateau a little bit.
It might, but I'd look over like the next 30 or 40 years. Tech is where it's going to be. What's the next paradigm shift? There's probably not going to be another paradigm shift in our lifetime.
Yeah.
How tech didn't really exist before, 2000, I'd say. I mean, yes,
Right.
computers existed and all that, but the tech revolution kind of started, the late 90s, right?
90s,
2000.
yeah.
So there's probably not going to be another sector created or a paradigm shift. Like when we went from horse and carriages to Model Ts, that was a paradigm shift, right?
Right. All right. Nate Kermit asks, dividend funds or picking single companies? How would you go about the evaluation of specific companies of interest?
That's a tough question to answer too, because honestly, I would just go with like a straight ETF, SP 500 to be simple.
I think for most people, if you don't want to spend the time to really research companies, and like you said, I mean, there are companies out there that I feel like I could pick and be solid with. But if you really are serious about getting dividend ETFs are a good way to go because they take that guesswork out of it, right? You just buy it and put money in it, and it keeps growing. And you get a decent dividend yield.
And what their goals are. For me, like I said, I need that 3.5% yield. That's where I'm targeting my withdrawal rate at. And then I can supplement that with cash secured puts and covered calls. With just covered calls alone, I could probably raise that up to about 7%. And that's like more income than I need. But if I wanted to go super simple, and I was younger, VTI, VU would be it probably.
Yeah.
You have to kind of look at what are you going to gain out of single positions, unless you're like an excellent stock picker and all that. I don't really care about outperforming the S&P 500. That's not something I care about.
Right.
Okay. So it is what it is. The only reason I'm into individual stocks is because I'm cherry picking the best of the best. I have a little bit more control over those holdings, the allocations and all that. But I'm getting rid of some as well and going to VYM because it's just so much easier.
And you spend a good deal of time actually looking at your holdings and doing the back investigation and all that stuff, checking
every single day. Yeah. I'm up at 7:30 in the morning. I'm logged in all day. And obviously, I run a YouTube channel, so it is what it is. Like I probably, if I didn't run a YouTube channel, then who knows? I might not even be in individual positions. I don't know.
So I had one personal question for you. The script that you run is pretty impressive when you do your monthly updates. Did you write that script yourself?
Yes, all the scripts are written by me in Python. Obviously, if Schwab was up to 2020 standards, they have an API. I could access their API and not even have to log in and do like an export a CSV file, because that's what I'm doing now, exporting a CSV file, importing all the cost basis and all that information into Google Sheets.
I got to say, you took Gen X Dividend Investors little Google Sheets and made that thing a piece of beauty.
Yeah, we all have our different, ways to track them. Because I'm doing two different accounts, it's very easy to just go in there and kind of see how both accounts are doing all in one view. Right. Because otherwise it's really hard to tell. Like, okay, you can sort and all that. Now you go into Schwab and get that, but it's kind of more difficult, right? Like it's just so much easier to go in Google Sheets and there you go. You can track your dividends all at once, and you can sort anything that you need, and you can pretty much do any report that you need.
Yeah. Investing Sensei says that TD Ameritrade has an API which is considering opening an account from them. And I know he writes his own script as well.
Yeah, he does.
He had actually downloaded one of his dividend trackers. Thank you for that, by the way, Radio Shack. And there's another dead company right there.
Radio
Yeah.
Shack
So,
used to be great when they actually had like surface mount components
oh
and
yeah, you could
you
go in
know,
and build your own motherboard there.
yeah. And then they got like they got rid of all that stuff and just did package stuff. It was just
Yeah.
useless, you know. But I miss that company.
All right. Well, listen, we're at about 40 minutes, Dave. So I want to really thank you for coming out tonight and talking with us. Is there anything you want to leave us with on a closing thought or?
No, I mean, I appreciate the questions, appreciate having me on. You know, it's like I said, I've been following you pretty much ever since I found you. You and I have been following each other for over a year. And and you know, like I said, I pretty much have been following you because the content that you make is kind of up my alley, right? Um, so that's you know, you Schwab, Vanguard, Fidelity, and you know, you're retirement focused too, and that's just where I'm at in my life, right? So
Well, I
appreciate
feel like keeping things simple, keeping your fees down, because over a lifetime that eats away everything, right? And then planning. I mean, the reason I got serious about this was I left a job, didn't know what to do. When I got my fire job, I cashed out my 401k, which, if you people are listening, don't ever do that. It's the
right,
worst thing you can do. And it was right at the end of the dot-com bubble. So I only had like 10 grand in it anyway. But by the time I cashed it out, I ended up with like 6,600 bucks, which
right.
I just
10%
spent.
plus whatever bracket you fall in and
Yeah,
tax.
and that was 8 years of savings. So I mean, I was I realized like I'm already behind. I'm 35 years old. I'm behind the ball. I haven't got anything. I got to get serious. And I started reading every book I could find on things. And the more I read, I was like, this stuff isn't really that hard. The problem is nobody teaches it to you.
Nope,
Unless
nope,
you go to school for finance, nobody teaches you any of this stuff.
right,
And YouTube certainly helps, but there's some guys out there who, and I'm not, there's some really good guys on there and some really bad information out there too. And I
yeah,
don't claim to know everything by any means, but I feel like the more you can learn, the better you're going to be. And like I said, I had people start asking me stuff at work, and I was like, one of them finally said, "Why don't you make videos?" And that's how my channel started. The name, again, not the best thing for general public, but if you're out there and you're learning, I don't just give advice. I don't just make videos for firefighters. I make it for everyone. I do
yeah,
have a tendency to make a little bit extra on 457s because those are more engineered to my line of work and public safety and that kind of stuff. But a 457 is basically just a government 401k. There's a couple things different, but if you think of it like that, it's the same. The rules are almost all the same. They're all taxed the same, and it doesn't matter.
so if I
Anyway,
ever need 40, 407, 405B or whatever that stuff is, I go to your channel because I don't know anything about them. So
yeah. And they're, well, and 457 and 403Bs, right? Those are two that, unless you work as a teacher, that's who the 403Bs are pretty much only teachers. And
right,
457 is you work for a governmental agency, be a fire department, police department, state, public works, or that kind of stuff. We have a 457, but it's basically the same. Just has a few
I
little
just never
differences.
407 or excuse me, 401k is all I have. I don't qualify for a Roth, and Roths really weren't even made popular probably until about like literally like 10 years ago, maybe not
Yeah.
even long ago. So even though they've been around longer than that, and I was already making too much anyway. So, you know, maybe I'll do a Roth ladder
You should be
conversion.
taking advantage of those conversions, man.
Yeah.
Do the traditional, and then roll it over.
Convert small
Convert it.
portions every year. You know,
Yeah.
that way you don't get taxed too high on it, or maybe even get taxed zero on it if you do it right.
Right. Well, back doors are legal. Take
Yeah.
advantage
Well, I
of it
can't
while
do
you
it
can.
now. I want to wait till I quit.
Yeah.
Just lower the tax bracket like all the way down to as low as it can go, and then convert a little bit every year.
Yeah, and that's a really good way, especially for you. That's going to work well because you'll have a lot of years to do those.
It goes by fast.
It sure does.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate you coming out. I appreciate everybody for stopping in. All right. Somebody says they're going to go watch the VP debate. Oh,
Yeah.
God. I'd rather go to the
On in
dentist.
9 minutes.
All right. Take
Hopefully
care.
it's not a bad
Thanks,
as the
everyone.
presidential one.
Yeah. All right. We'll see ya.
All right, everybody. Later.